Thank you for joining me. This is Austin, and this is the 7th entry in my Responding Kind video series, which is based on my book, Responding Kind, available on Amazon. So, the 7th entry was regarding my views on morality, specifically the fact that people refer to me as an optimist, and while I can understand why they say that, I actually don't think I'm an optimist, especially after discovering someone like Dr. Peterson, who I think the best way to explain it would be the foundation of my philosophy, and his as well, is very pessimistic in nature. But from there, we try to find pragmatic, optimistic truths that we can actually invest in and actually believe. Like when I hear the term optimist, I tend to take that as someone who's almost delusional, someone who gets into a negative situation and they can't acknowledge the fact that, frankly, this is indeed a negative situation. I call a spade a spade. If you're in some trouble, then obviously it's trouble. But I do believe that there really isn't too many situations that you get into that you can't get out of. And there's always some productive movement forward that you can make. And even if there isn't a productive movement forward, there will definitely be a lesser of evils. In fact, I had a conversation with a close friend of mine. His name was Tristan, and he was going through a hard time. And so my family, because I stay with my family, we opened our doors to him. And me and Tristan had a conversation that really opened my eyes as far as getting out of situations and how difficult it can be to get out of situations. This was a guy who was sleeping in his car. He didn't have a job and frankly didn't know where his next meal was coming from. And he looked at me and he said, "You know what, Austin? It is really hard to die out here." And while that sounds really negative, he meant it in a positive way, because what he was saying was that, as terrible as my situation is, I still find a way to get food. I still find a way to go to sleep at night and rest. I'm still safe. And, he was in what many would consider rock bottom. But it's one of those pessimistic things that is actually like the silver lining, where it's like, yeah, the situation is difficult, but look, society has really progressed. In modern day, we don't have to worry about tigers. We really don't have to worry about getting water, because frankly, it's illegal to not give someone water. Restaurants have to give you water if you walk in and ask for it. We have laws that really show the brighter side of humanity, and people are more empathetic than ever. It is difficult to get into a situation that you can't get out of. While they do exist, there will always be either a lesser of two evils or a productive move forward. A lot of people, when they look at morality, when they talk about good and bad, they're talking more from like platitudes and not from a true understanding. Like, I think as far as good and bad, both are entirely dependent on context. And so in that sense, there's almost a utilitarian kind of sense to it, right? So depending on what your aim is, what's good and what's bad would be two completely different things. Furthermore, another thing I have an issue with is a lot of people talk about good as though they refer to good and bad in regards to like how they hit your senses. And so what is pleasurable is always considered good, and then what's unpleasant is always considered bad. But there are plenty of examples. One such example is exercising. You guys know I love to work out. Fitness is one of those things where it's like, it doesn't feel good, and it's very uncomfortable, and it's painful, but it's a benefit, it's an asset to you because of the benefits that come along with doing it. Whereas something that can feel euphoric, instantly the first example to come to my mind is something like drugs, meth or ecstasy. In the short term, it sends you to heaven, but in the long term, it sets you back. It ends up being a liability. And I think that's the subtle difference between how I use good and bad. I use them more as assets and liabilities. And so I don't take into account platitudes, and I don't take into account how they hit your senses. It's more like, I have a goal. I have something I'd like to move forward towards, and regardless of how it feels and regardless of platitudes, I would like to move forward. And moving forward is dependent on which assets I utilize and which liabilities I avoid. And in that sense, yeah, I don't really feel like much of an optimist. I definitely feel realistic in how I approach and view things. But if there is an optimistic truth, then like, I'll allow it to make me happy because it's there. And so that's what the 7th entry was about. And if you've watched this, then thank you so much. Drop a like. I would love if you smash that like button, and leave a comment too, because I love engaging with you guys and I'd love to hear what you think of it. And we'll see you at the next one.